the Fantasy Source Football Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, standing here with George Winkler. It is Thanksgiving week. And what does that normally mean, George?
It means a triple header of great football, and especially this time, even the Miami-Dallas game looks good because Miami's on a 3-game winning streak.
Wait, you think of football first? You don't think of deep-fried turkey?
I don't think of deep-fried turkey. I don't think of my family. Well, maybe that's going too far, but I do think of football a lot.
Liz, if you're listening, he does think of his family. All right, well, let's talk about fantasy football right now, and we'll get to the turkey later. Thanksgiving matchups this week are, as you said, very, very interesting from a football fandom perspective, but also very interesting from a fantasy football perspective because there are fantasy-relevant matchups all across the board in all 3 games that you have to pay attention to if you're going to be competitive at this point of the year. And you know what? It's very difficult to have that many games on Thursday because there is not going to be complete information about the games that are happening on Sunday when you have to decide who to start on Thursday.
And there's a lot of injury problems on Thursday to deal with, so it's the week to have insurance for all your injured players. Green Bay, Greg Jennings, James Starks, both limited in practice this week, so you're looking at Ryan Grant and James Jones. It's time to go check them out and see if they're available because they could be starting and playing big roles in what could be a shootout in Detroit.
Now, let's say you were a Green Bay fan or someone who is really interested in those running backs. It hasn't turned out very well for Starks and Grant because they're throwing the ball so much. But let's say you handcuff the two of them. Which one of those guys would you prefer to have for this week?
Well, I would prefer to have Starks, but it sounds like he's not going to go. So I would go with Grant this week, and I'd seriously consider him because Detroit is giving up, 125-plus rushing yards a game. And even though Green Bay seems to do all of its powers to not run the ball, this might be the week where they finally decide to get some of that involved in their offense.
Now, Detroit, for their part, Matt Stafford has been struggling, it seems, with an injury to his index finger, I believe it is, throwing the ball. Has thrown a lot more interceptions since having that injury. And on top of that, the running back situation still seems to be in flux. Kevin Smith seems to have a grip on it right now. How do you see that situation breaking down?
Well, Kevin Smith is getting first-team reps in practice this week, and, he had over 200 total yards against the Panthers.
What is this, 2009?
I don't know what it is, but, consider the opponent because Carolina has one of the worst run defenses in the league. They're playing linebackers off the practice squad because everybody's hurt on their team. So, I like Kevin Smith as probably the top waiver wire pickup this week. But can he get in there and do it against Green Bay? It's going to be a tougher challenge because Green Bay is about 12th in run defense. So, if I'm desperate, I would consider him, but, look at your other options as well.
Now, in the other Thursday afternoon game, Miami against Dallas, is Felix Jones and DeMarco Murray seem to be a decision must be made, it feels like. But they could also just go by committee. How do you see that breaking down?
Well, Jerry Jones says DeMarco Murray is going to stay the feature back, and in the first game back for Felix Jones, Jerry's way came through. DeMarco Murray was the feature back. Felix Jones had just a handful of touches. Now, Jones could get more going on as he feels more comfortable with his his injury and coming back, but I see DeMarco Murray as being one of the more valuable runners down the stretch and could be a Rookie of the Year candidate.
Now, on the other side of that matchup, some owners, I've been seeing a little bit of chatter. I don't know how much chatter you've been seeing about, and this almost pains me to say because it just goes against everything in my core. Thinking about picking up Matt Moore and trying to roll with him because he seems to be on a bit of a hot streak. The Dallas defense is not chopped liver, though. How do you see Matt Moore's matchup this week?
Well, be careful.
Be careful out there, folks.
He's hot. He did have a great game against Buffalo with the 3 touchdown passes. But like you said, it's not Buffalo he's playing this week. He's going to have to face DeMarcus Ware on the other side. And, he's going to bring some pressure. So, I like Matt Moore as a backup kind of as insurance down the stretch. But as far as starting him this week, I think you can find a better option.
And in the nightcap, in a game that we'll both be watching as Niner fans, but also all those, if one were to gamble, one would probably be well advised to take the under. San Francisco and Baltimore in the battle of the Harbaughs, as it were. How do you see that one breaking down, especially with the 49ers running backfield? Frank Gore perpetually banged up. He seems like he's okay. It might not be. It is Baltimore's punishing defense.
Well, Frank Gore came out of the Arizona game okay, or as okay as Frank Gore can be at this time of the season. So, I like Frank Gore, especially if Ray Lewis misses another game. Ray missed his first in 58 games or
something like that.
And with a toe injury, and, John Harbaugh said something like, he's looking good, but he's not quite 50%, so I don't know really what to do with that, but it doesn't sound like Ray Lewis is going to play in this game, so I like Frank Gore as a starter.
So you like Gore. What about those owners that may have picked up Kendall Hunter at a certain point? Is he an RB3, a flex play, or is he going to get any kind of carries, do you envision?
Well, in a matchup like this where even without Ray Lewis, they are still one of the top running defenses in the league, I don't think it's as favorable enough of a matchup to put Hunter in this week. Especially, Gore's going to get the majority of the carries, and I just don't think the 49ers are going to be running up and down the field on Baltimore like they would maybe somebody else like St. Louis later in the season.
All right, George. Well, moving forward, beyond the Thanksgiving games, there were several things happened this past week that weren't fantasy consideration. First of all, Matt Schaub 2 weeks ago came out, and the Texans are coming back to action with Matt Leinart under center. He's just one of several players that are going to get an expanded role moving forward. Schaub was probably a borderline starting fantasy quarterback the whole year. He had been projected to be one of the top 7 quarterbacks. So many people, including me, were just hanging on to him and starting him week after week. And now we're stuck with the likes of Ryan Fitzpatrick if we were able to grab him, or someone else who is in the bottom half of ownable quarterbacks. How do you see Leinart coming in, first of all? And second, how do you see him affecting the entire Texans offense? Because they've already got a really good running game.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, Houston has turned into a running team, and even with Matt Schaub in there, they were up in the top of the league in rushing attempts. So I think Leinart will come in and he'll hand the ball off to Arian Foster and Ben Tate, maybe dump some passes over the middle to Owen Daniels. It might. Of course, it'll help when Andre Johnson gets back. But as far as like Jacoby Jones and Kevin Walter, I think you can cut bait on them with Matt Leinart in the lineup because I think it's going to be more of a safe passing game when he's in there.
Now, you mentioned Andre Johnson. Past experience with, he's not every wide receiver. He's Andre Johnson. He's one of the, when healthy, he's one of the top wide receivers in the game, both real life and in fantasy. Past experience with receivers with hamstring injuries, what would be your advice for people who own him?
Well, if he's 100%, you got to put him in your lineup because he's that type of a talent. Now, it complicates things having Leinart in the lineup because, if it were Matt Schaub, you're feeling a lot better about Andre Johnson going forward. But, it's been a tough year for Andre Johnson owners. What can we say about that?
Nice and blunt there. Another guy who is going to get an extended look this week, and probably it's kind of interesting that he was drafted by the Minnesota Vikings. Toby Gerhart probably going to get a lot of looks now that Adrian Peterson has a high ankle sprain, and last report that I saw was likely to be out this weekend. What do you see from Gerhart for this weekend?
Well, we joke around the office that he's 2-yard Toby because that's what he averages.
Well, that's what he's asked to do, isn't it?
That is what he's asked to do, but now he's going to ask to do more. And, believe it or not, the Atlanta Falcons are second in run defense. So this is no easy matchup. So, you got to pick up Gerhart if you are a Peterson owner. You probably should have had him on your bench already. But as far as starting him this week, not looking too good. I don't
just
think.
Hope you had somebody else that you would hope to plan that you had planned on using, right?
Correct.
So I mean, you're basically saying that Gerhart is an RB3. He's not even an RB2 this week.
Yeah, that's what I would say, and I'm real skeptical about his value moving forward in an offense with a rookie quarterback, and I think they'll even try to get Percy Harvin involved in some runs just to try to compensate for the Peterson loss.
Now, and another team that is dealing with injury right now, the Chicago Bears, they're going without Jay Cutler. They're going with Caleb Haney, who I believe we last saw playing in the NFC Championship game and holding his own. Not being fantastic, but holding his own. Mike Martz has a history of doing fairly well with young quarterbacks, or at least inexperienced quarterbacks, as the case may be. How do you see this affecting the Bears, especially someone like Matt Forte, who, takes checkdowns, takes passes out of the backfield quite a bit?
I think it's good for Forte. They have a great matchup this week against the Raiders, and I think Haney is going to hand off to him a lot because even though Martz is known for his pass-happy offenses, Chicago has been a run-heavy team the past 5 or 6 weeks when they've had this winning streak. So I think Forte continues to get looks. Haney, like you said, we saw him in the NFC Championship game. It was a small sample, but he led 2 touchdown drives against the Packers. I'm really intrigued to see what he can do, especially because he can move outside of the pocket. But as far as fantasy value for Haney, I'm not too optimistic. But, and with the Bears receivers, we weren't counting on them much anyway. So, it hurts Earl Bennett because he doesn't have his friend from Vanderbilt throwing the ball to him. But he was really the only wide receiver you were even thinking about before Cutler got hurt.
Well, how can any quarterback fail when they've got Earl Bennett and Roy Williams to throw to, huh?
They got a lot of straight line runners. If you can throw the seam route, you're looking good with those guys.
All right, George, and to wrap up, I've got kind of a fun question for you. 2 elite tight ends have kind of separated themselves from the rest of the pack, from even the other elite tight ends this year in fantasy. Rob Gronkowski and Jimmy Graham. Who you got?
I got Gronkowski. And, earlier in the day, I had Graham. But after looking this over, I think, Gronkowski's younger. He has more touchdowns, the 20 touchdowns in 26 games.
Wait, Gronkowski's younger? How much younger?
2 years younger.
2 years younger, okay.
Yeah, so, and he's done it 2 years in a row. So there's something to that, Graham, gets more targets. That's to his advantage. And he doesn't have to deal with the Belichick factor, which is do the touchdowns all of a sudden disappear. But I don't think that's going to happen with Gronkowski because, he has just been such a great help to Tom Brady this year. I don't think he's going to forget that. And I think moving forward, he will be, every bit as effective in the red zone as he has been this year.
You know what? I actually tend to agree with you because the Patriots – this is my favorite pet analogy, is that Bill Belichick runs the Patriots the way a 12-year-old runs his Madden team. And I mean that in a very good way, in that he uses his tight ends, both tight ends in a base formation. They run no huddle. They run slants. They have really fast wide receivers that just cut slants all the time and do that thing. And then they make sure to get those super freaky athletic tight ends who are more athletic than even your regular freaky athletic tight ends that can play wide receiver and also power block. That's what Gronkowski does. He's going to be in on every single play, whether he's lined up on the line or split out wide. No matter what happens, he's going to be one of the top 2 targets in the passing game.
Yeah, and I like that the game station or the Madden reference that you made there because Belichick is like one of those guys who gets one play that works and he won't forget it. He'll keep doing it over and over again until he's beating you 42-7.
It's double flag routes, throw the corners.
On 4th down in his own end. He'll do drop kicks, he'll do it all.
Cuts people with no remorse whatsoever.
I mean, last night they get a touchdown for Vereen there when they really had no business getting a touchdown. That's why fantasy owners love Bill Belichick. That's one reason they love him.
And on that note, George, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you.